What's all this about unidentified federal agents abducting peeps? Maybe they self identify as peaceful movers of bodies in public areas. As I record this, it is, I think, day 70 something, 71 or 72 of the ongoing protests in Portland, Oregon, which is in a state in the northwest of the United States of America. Most of you who are listening to this will probably know about it, or you can just go on and check. There was, I think, a more widespread and covered thing was what was going on in Seattle, which is in Washington. I think it's the capital city of Washington, and Portland is the capital city of Oregon, which is a neighboring state. With Seattle, they had the CHAZ, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. They tried to do one in, I think they tried to do one in Portland as well. There's a movement there called PDX, and there's Black Lives Matter, and there's all these other people. They had the people with the supposed the moms, the wall of moms, and there's these different people. I saw this with some videos of some guy who was supposedly being interviewed and showing that, oh, I'd been shot with these rubber bullets, and then they show this other clip of him actually being recorded with the person that was with him, actually jumping over the fence and lighting fires, and there's all these back and forths. But there was a bit of a flare up of supposedly federal agents going in there and snatching people off the street without identifying who they are, just snatching them off the streets, and people are saying snatching them. And I think there was one particular case where that happened. Somebody covered it. They were in some kind of minivan, and these agents came out. They're wearing camo. They're all kitted up, and they had they had an identifying badge or crest or on their shoulder. It's a patch. They didn't say their names, but say your name, say my name. If no one is around you, there's a Destiny's Child song. So they don't have to say their name. That's not how this whole situation works. If you're there, apparently, as I mentioned before, police are enforcement agents. They enforce the laws of the actual state. When it's the state police, they're enforcing that. You can have police that are not necessarily tied into a state, but police of any organization enforce the laws of there. They're not necessarily peace officers, even though some people might seem to think that's what it is. I think there's some objections to the whole situation. Oh, the Miranda rights aren't being given. People aren't being told like, oh, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say will be used against you in a court of law. You're being detained for X, Y, Z. No, that is something where people I think have watched too much television, and they believe that's something that happens in every single one. But it turns out they actually do that if they're planning on charging you with something, and that is more for their own protection, so they can't go on and give something admissible to the actual court of law once the case is going. And if you hadn't been read your Miranda rights, that stuff can be thrown out. So they kind of say that it's more of a protection for them rather than a protection for you. Technically, apparently, you can be arrested and detained just on the suspicion of doing certain things or being in certain locations. This is how the system is set up, which is why I'm against the state, because the state is an organization that has a monopoly of violence over any given area. If you just had, I don't know, can mall cops do that? Like, let's say you go to a mall, go to a shopping mall, and there's police there, and somebody just thinks you've done something. Can they just detain you? I don't know if the security people can detain you. If you go into a neighborhood, like when those people went into the place in St. Louis, if those people had private security, could the private security have detained them instead of those two, that man and his wife having to come out with their weapons and brandish them as these people were in their private property? I'm not quite sure, but the police can definitely do it. The federal agents can do it when you're actually challenging a federal office. And you know this. People know this. One thing I've asked people, the whole entrapment situation, when somebody goes and pretends to be a drug dealer and then sells drugs to somebody, and then they're like, oh, I'm a cop, and they arrest you. Somebody pretends to be a prostitute and goes and initiates the whole situation and catches a draw and says, oh, I'm arresting you. Somebody goes in as an informant of the police, and they go in with a wire, and they actually get all these things, and people are like, oh, we caught you. Like, these kind of things, that they're not identifying who they are. This whole idea, why do people, undercover cops, this is a regular thing. People understand these things. Why do people think that police somehow have to go and identify who they are and what they're doing? That is not how this thing works. Plainclothes policemen exist. Undercover policemen exist. This thing is something that is common. This is not just the United States of America. I'm recording this from Kenya. There's a flying squad, a special squad that just drive around in regular cars and you see them speeding and just like people in the cars with guns and just police people. And they have their own things. This is something that happens on the regular. I don't know where this comes from. There might just be some hypocrisy in this. People, because it's becoming it's because it's something that is actually harming them or people they feel they support, the causes they feel they support. Like these people feel they can just identify as peaceful protesters, and then now we're supposed to not think about all the negative things that are being done by the people who are with those people. And when you're around somebody that does negative things, just like if the police sit around while a policeman is doing something wrong, that George Floyd situation, that one policeman was kneeling on his neck. The other policemen were standing by watching. All the policemen got arrested because the other policemen were not directly kneeling on the neck, but they sat by with that one policeman and didn't stop that policeman. And I think there has been, with the ongoing protests, there's still violence, there's still riots. I think just the other day, yesterday as I'm recording this, there was actually breaking into one of the Portland police precincts and burning some things in there. It's actually been called a riot. The mayor has gone out. It's a mess. It's a mess. I have some people who I follow, some acquaintances on social media that we don't follow each other on the wall, but occasionally I go in and check and see their wall and be like, okay, what are people who think in a different way on a socio-political, ideological way? And this was a few weeks ago. They were talking about how why is nobody still covering the peaceful protests? Like, how has that gone out to the news? It's like, no, it's gone out to the news because they're not peaceful. Because if they still cover them, first of all, people are covering them. Maybe the people this person was watching weren't covering them. The mainstream media, the CNNs, the MSNBCs. Maybe there's certain sources where they get information from that they're not getting it. But I see people covering this. I see people, alternative media places covering this. I see people like on Fox News covering this. But this person might not watch Fox News, so they don't understand it. But that stuff's not there. Why aren't they still covering the Yellow Vests protests that has been ongoing on and off in France? Why are certain things identified as XYZ and then other things that seem similar to be identified as ABC? That's just it's a question. It's something like with this police with this whole short thought. It was just why are people identifying these people as a certain way? From that one video, it was just echoed by other people. I might leave this link from Tim Pool. He did a rather excellent, I think, expose on this, showing how there was just one or two actual reports of that initial situation, and then that got magnified and changed like a game of telephone where somebody embellished or somebody changed some wording things and run, and then you start reporting over and over again, and then it gets to somebody who's saying, "Oh, I've seen 5 or 6 cases of this happening," when it turns out it was just this initial case of this one person who was detained by these people in this van and then released, but that doesn't get out there. Then 5 different people take that one story and then they don't cover it in the entirety of it, and then now the person who you're talking to says, "I heard 5 occasions of this happening in different ways," because those different people who say it will cover that one actual incident in 5 slightly different ways over an amount of time that the person who's telling you about this, who has those actual fears that, hey, we're turning into a police state, that they seem to think it is actually a lot more widespread than it actually is. And this is something that is typical, I think, of this entire current hysteria, current first world protest movements, and it's just frustrating. So let me know what you think. I appreciate you taking time to listen. Till next time, like, share, subscribe, links to merchandise store. You can also help me out if you enjoy this content at all with just comments or sharing or links to PayPal and things like that below. Goodbye.